I'm a strong believer in the old adage that adversity is a gift. And I believe that the current global COVID-19 pandemic creates an opportunity, actually, to finally address long overdue innovations in leadership and governance. The kinds of issues that we've been talking about that are needed relative to a new type of leadership are issues that we've been talking about for a very long time. Over 20 years ago, in 1999, four renegades from Silicon Valley, technologists and technology journalists actually, got together and published something called the Cluetrain Manifesto. And one of the self-evident truths that they wrote about in the manifesto was, and I'll read it to you, there are two conversations going on, one inside the company, one with the market. In most cases, neither conversation is going very well. Almost invariably, the cause of failure can be traced to obsolete notions of command and control. And I believe that this is especially true today. Today, more than ever, we need to loosen the coupling between command and control, and we have to very intentionally as leaders improve our skill, hone our skill in the art of conversation. So firstly, relative to loosening the coupling between command and control, leaders need to be able to articulate simply and in a compelling fashion, very clearly, the mission that they want their organization to go out and pursue. That's number one. Second of all, they need to behave more as leaders than as managers, which means empowering people all the way to the edge of their organizations to go out and achieve the mission in whatever way they believe is going to be most effective. So that's number one. Number two, relative to the art of conversation, leaders need to be completely people-centric, not just customer-centric. And what that means is that they have to be active listeners so that they understand the motivations, the needs, the constraints that other stakeholders are working within. And then they have to have a willingness to engage in an open, generative dialogue, not a debate, it's not about storytelling either. This is really about engaging in a dialogue, a give and take, call and response in the terms of improvisational jazz and theater, in which together they can find a path forward and creatively come up with the best solutions given the context. So for highly distributed organizations, and I think that's what we're faced with today more than ever in this digitally enabled world, and one in which so many people are now having to work from home or from a distance from their employer, I think it's really extremely important to keep these possibilities in mind and embrace new forms of leadership and governance.
I think I read the Cluetrain Manifesto when it came out, and there's been the thing that we discussed, which actually on our web seminar, was the fact that there have been a lot of these warm words for some time. So I've got a friend who wrote a book called The CEO, the Chief Engagement Officer. His phrase was, "Are you God or are you a guide? And you should be a guide, not a god."
It's not
Kevin
bad.
coined the phrase the other day, leadership is a role, not a right.
Mm-hmm.
The big question is, will COVID change people's behaviours to move towards that wisdom? Will they be forced to, indeed, whether they choose to or not, or will people revert back?
Well, as we know, only too painfully, change is very hard won, both in ourselves, in other individuals that we know or that we've worked with. and in organizations and in societies. Change is very hard won. And I think in my experience, there are two principal drivers of change. One is very positive. So when people get a taste of, let's say, the higher layers of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, that's highly motivating. When they discover the power of social connections, when they discover the power of greater status and a sense of competence, and of course, when they discover the joy of self-realization, that can be a very powerful driver of further change in their lives that will enable them to further taste those intoxicating and very positive benefits that we seek in our lives as human beings. Now, there's another major driver of change as well, and that's driven by something much more negative, which is pain. And I think, sadly, as relates to COVID, it may be more the latter than the former that drives change. I think once people in society are experiencing sufficiently high levels of pain because of their own illness or loss, or those of people around them, or the economic consequences of the pandemic, it may drive them to change, or at least to start changing. What I also believe, though, is that as they start going through that process, as they start embracing new ways of interacting, as they start developing new skills and unlearning old, no longer relevant or helpful skills, they'll discover the joys, the pleasures of these new possibilities. And that will have a snowball effect and further reinforce these changes. So I think there's a bit of a yin and a yang to the process of individual and collective change.
May I ask a question which relates back to the point you made about importance of leaders engaging in conversation? And it's the purpose. I'm interested in the purpose. We feel very strongly that the role of leadership is about creating trust in organizations in their ability to lead them, and also to engage people to build trust, because we think trust is the formation of relationship, and relationship is the way that businesses will go forward more effectively. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I know. I love that notion. It comes out very clearly in your paper, and it came out in our earlier conversation. One thing I would add on it, kind of riffing on the theme of trust, would be that not only is trust necessary in order to be able to build relationships, trust is also one of the benefits that is generated by a relationship. In other words, as we gain more experience with each other, our trust with each other, in each other, only grows. And so we're able to do more and more together. And when others learn of our relationship, that may confer trust. The very fact that we have a relationship and that we have a sustained relationship adds trust to our individual brands in the eyes of others. So there's a virtuous cycle here when it comes to trust. You need trust in order to start building a relationship. And then as you further deepen and extend that relationship, it generates further trust, not only within that relationship, but within a broader ecosystem.
I'd like to just perhaps ask how we can reconcile improvisation, which is a key area that you're talking about, with something we believe in, which is kind of organizational trust-based relationships. In other words, the relationship capital of a whole organization, not simply the individuals involved. So individuals have conversations, individuals can improvise, and of course individuals are the components of this. But we're also trying to think about how does the whole organization build a culture and an approach and a set of behaviours that are trusting and trustworthy with its partners, and so therefore people will choose to buy from them, work for them, work with them, and so on. That's an individual can be great, and the organisation could be terrible, and that's a failure of leadership potentially. So we're interested in that improvisation built into, as it were, the whole organisation. What do you think about that?
So my belief about that is that it can only occur through shared experience. That it's one thing to talk the talk, and it's another thing to walk the talk. And it's the way people develop trust, the way people also more broadly develop their improvisational skills is through shared experiences. And the more you can have those experiences, the more you can iterate, the more you can spin, the more you can orchestrate, if you like, opportunities for those shared experiences, the more these various virtuous outcomes that we're talking about will be generated. So you actually want to create opportunities for teams to prototype together. This is what we call hackathons, and give them a challenge and say, hack in the next 24 hours a new marketing program, or hack in the next 3 hours a new customer use case and a new customer persona that goes with that use case, or hack in the next 7 days a new piece of functionality that may address a new authentic need that we've recently uncovered. Or go out into the field with these 3 people or these 5 people and engage in an observational exercise where you go and then I've done with this with clients, saying, go find a place where the kind of consumers that you're interested in hang out and observe them. Don't even talk to them, but observe them, and then have a conversation together, debrief about what you saw or what you think you saw. So one can create all kinds of opportunities for people to work together in a fairly safe context, where it feels more like play than work, but where through that shared experience, they'll be learning from each other, they'll be getting more comfortable with improvisation, and they'll be building trust.